All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this NIHR ARC North Thames webinar on developing research culture. My name is Sylvie Cooper. I'm a lecturer with the NIHR ARC North Thames Academy, and I'm chairing today's session. I am so delighted to welcome our speakers, Matt King and Linus Lewis, and our responders, Sedina Lewis and Sandev Panasa, who will be guiding us through a discussion really about developing research culture, how you go about it, and giving us some case examples from different settings, including NHS, acute services and community services, charity sectors, and local authority settings. Please note that the session is being recorded and we aim to share a recording later after the event. Fran has also really helpfully requested that you make introductions for yourselves as the people in the room in the chat. This is for two reasons. One, it's really helpful for us to know who's here, but also to use this as a connection opportunity. Part of developing research culture is working collaboratively across different organizations and with different people, and the opportunities to meet who is operating in the environment and where those opportunities lie are quite dispersed and scattered. And so using meetings like this as connection points can be really useful for finding who you can work with and where you can work with them. So some brief housekeeping before I make the introductions of our speakers. Please could you check that your audiovisual settings are set for your microphone to be muted. You're welcome to use the chat at any time. When we get to the Q&A portion of today's session, I will ask that you raise your hand before you unmute. As I've mentioned, we are recording this event, and the agenda is as follows. We will have 30 minutes of presentations from Matt and Linus, so about 50 minutes of each of them speaking, followed by 20 minutes of reflections from our two responders, Sedina and Sandev, sorry, and then 20 minutes for Q&A. And so I think that'll be a really great balance of presentations, discussion, and reflection together. So I am just pulling up some of my notes. I apologize because I have my screen open on the slides and so can't really see anything else. But I wanted to start first by giving us a bit of context to all be reflecting on. So what is research culture? Research culture from the NIHR's perspective, the National Institutes for Health and Care Research, sees that research culture is about proactively integrating research in health and care systems to provide more access to life-saving treatments, opportunities to participate in research, and build on services that meet the needs of those who are using them, while also fostering the UK's vibrant life science and research sectors. There is benefit of research that is felt by individuals and communities, organisations, and across the 4 nations of the UK. There are also real-term returns on investment with better patient outcomes, more sustainable workforces who have better job satisfaction and supported career progression, and a stronger health and care system when we invest in research. Research also helps us inform decision-making, improve health and care services, derive economic benefit, and societal and cultural benefits. So that really whistle-stop tour of it hopefully sets the scene for research culture. And before I hand over to Matt, I wanted to just give a brief overview of who he is. I'm sure that he will tell you a little bit more about himself as well. But Matt King is the Chief Executive of TrustLinks, which is an Essex-based mental health and wellbeing charity, which empowers individuals and communities through recovery, connection, and growth. For over 14 years, he has led initiatives which include the Growing Together Therapeutic Community Garden, the Recovery College and Healthy Mind Hub services, children and youth wellbeing projects, and the development of the TrustLink Wellbeing app. Matt has a background which spans youth work, the civil service, local authority strategy, and national children's rights programs at UNICEF UK. And he brings deep experience in community development and social impact, alongside academic research on child labour and rights in Bangladesh. And I think it's this cross-reaching and this cross-sector um, perspective that I think Matt will be able to add most helpfully. So thanks so much, Matt, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Sylvie. Thank you for the introduction there. Yeah, so I've just got a couple of slides just to set out, firstly, the work of trust links, and then what research we're involved with and the kind of the way we're embedding research culture, and then finally what the benefits are to us as an organisation and our work. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? So as Sylvie outlined, Trust Links, we're a local independent charity for mental health, wellbeing and the environment in Essex. We're just celebrating our 25-year anniversary this year. So we were founded in the year 2000, really to respond to the needs of people in our community in Southend, in particular around mental health and wellbeing. So people were discharged from mental health hospitals. They may be getting their clinical needs met, but they weren't getting their social and emotional and community needs met. So we set up the Growing Together Therapeutic Community Garden project as a way of providing that safe space for people to meet other people in a community environment, participate in positive activities and support their well-being and development. Obviously, over the last 25 years, we've grown and expanded as an organisation and have a range of services as listed on the slide. About 65 staff, 160 volunteers, more than 7,000 beneficiaries in the last year. The latest innovation is our app. So we've got a wellbeing app that is free to download for anybody across the UK. And that's access to wellbeing resources. But kind of linked into all of that is the way that we capture data, the way that we measure the impact and the outcomes that we achieve through our work, and then use that data to further our work, further our cause, and that's what I'm going to come on to. So if you could do the next slide, please. So just thinking about the sort of research opportunities and benefits, particularly for us as an organisation, as a local independent charity, the first thing I thought about was evaluation of the projects is really crucial. So kind of building that evidence base for further investment and capturing the impact and the difference that we make. So obviously there's both the quantitative ways of measuring outcomes and capturing those, and then the qualitative side of it. We've worked with quite a few partners on this over the years. So we've worked with University of Essex, with Anglia Ruskin University. We've had student social workers, we've had other student psychology students, that sort of thing, who've come and worked with us, and to capture that quantitative data. So we use a range of outcome measures, things like the Short Warwick Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, PHQ-9, GAD-7, Client Service Receipt Inventory, so looking at the use of other services, secondary services and inpatient services and A&E services, and then how people, hopefully through using our service, will rely less on these clinical and other services. And then by capturing that data, by collating it, we've done our own research, we've captured that and put that in our own reports. And then we have, as I said, worked with academics in University of Essex and others to capture that. Sometimes we've then written those up as papers that have been published, that have been a great way of proving and showing the impact of what we do. We've also, co-production's a really key part of our work. So people with lived experience being involved in the design, delivery, evaluation of our services. And research is a key part of that. So we've worked with the likes of Citizens UK to learn the community organising methodologies and the way that we can involve lots of people, and particularly our peers, people who've got lived experience of mental health challenges themselves. So they've been trained up to consult with other people, engage with other people, and then capture that through one-to-one conversations, through house meetings, through focus groups, and getting people involved in that peer research. And it's both for our own benefit. So we've been commissioned, for example, by Southend City Council to do some work on suicide and suicide engagement, and what some of the preventative factors to prevent people needing suicidal, or prevent people with suicidal behaviours, but also to help people prevent that suicidal ideation. So we've done some research on that. We're currently looking at next year. There's the Greater Essex mayoral election, so we're looking at capturing the views of both our members and the wider public on what priorities are for that mayoral election. So there's a whole different ways that we can use that peer research and engagement to capture that capture the views of people, and I'd say that's a key part of research. We've got the Research Engagement Network. Some of you may well have been involved in the REN work. We've had some funding through the ICB, the NHS, to get people involved in the Research Engagement Network, to expose people to what research opportunities there are out there. An example of this we're actually going to run over the next couple of months is research parties, we're calling them. So it's an opportunity for our members, our people with lived experience, to get involved in what the research projects there are out there, just be exposed to that research opportunities. And we're kind of integrating it with our Christmas party that we're going to run anyway. So then we can put on free food for our members, and we can have some entertainment, but also give them exposure to different sort of clinical trials and different research that they could get involved with, and just kind of raise that profile of research and evaluation. And then finally, one of our members of staff who's been on a research fellowship through ARC, so it gives them that opportunity to engage with research at a much deeper level. We then had some funding to backfill their time so that they can be freed up to get involved with this, and then we can have other staff supporting the work that they would have done. So our mental health lead on our Growing Together project has spent quite a lot of time understanding much more about research, developing her own research proposals, and really getting equipped as a staff member to get involved in research through that fellowship. So if you can just go to the final slide. So this mirrors some of what Sylvie said in the introduction in terms of the benefits of a research culture. Obviously, as a voluntary sector organisation, funding is one of the key things that I have to deal with and have to think about. And I just think that evaluation and research can underpin all of that and really support you as an organisation. And for us, it really differentiates us from lots of other organisations as well, because it kind of gives us a unique edge. We've got really clear data on what we do, what the impact that we deliver. And when I go to funders, which I do a lot, it's really easy to evidence the impact that we do. We've got the case studies through the qualitative work. We've got the focus groups. We've got, obviously we also capture things like videos of our members and telling their story, and photographs and that sort of thing. And that's all important data that we can use to demonstrate the difference that we make to the people we support in the wider community. And then that evidence is really crucial for getting funding and making that case for services. It's also really good for often I'm in discussions, and having been in my role coming up for 15 years, I've got lots of relationships across different sectors with the NHS, with the ICBs, with local authorities as well. And it's kind of influencing that, the shift in the way that services are run and the way that services can be run, and thinking about the transformational work that we can do at a non-clinical community level, and kind of comparing that with some of the more clinical, more treatment-based mental health services that perhaps aren't achieving the same results and aren't doing it in that sort of person-centered way. And I think kind of bringing people's real stories and real experiences to life, and then backing that up, underpinning that with academic research, is just such a valuable way of presenting that information. And you kind of chip away over time at commissioners, service directors, and kind of leaders in the health and social care world, and get them to see the benefits of that wider work within the voluntary community sector. So part of that is that recommendations for service change and improvement. So for example, one of our Growing Together evaluations in the early days demonstrated that it was quite a male environment, and the focus groups, particularly with some of the women, said that they felt that some other women were being put off by because it's a community garden. It can be quite sort of masculine, blokey. To have a sort of safe space for women was something that came up as a recommendation. So we did set that up quite a few years ago. We set up a women's group. We've also got an empowerment program for women that started in the last year. So we wouldn't naturally have thought of that. Obviously, through co-production, it's the sort of thing that comes up. But by doing that sort of very clear piece of research and evaluation, we then identified that this was something that we wanted to improve and change, and it's had really fantastic impact on our beneficiaries. I think evidencing the need and having a deeper understanding of the issues, challenges, and opportunities, that very much links into that wider peer engagement, peer evaluation piece, so that we're kind of looking outwards, as well as looking at the users that we've got. Again, when you're looking for funding, it's really crucial to have data on what the needs are, what the needs in the community are. So often funders say, well, how do you know that this need has been identified? And then if we can say through our research, through our evaluation, we had a project called Listening Together that we did last year, funded by the Better Care Fund, and we consulted and engaged 100 people in Castle Point and Rochford in Essex about what they thought the needs were in terms of mental health. We did focus groups, we did one-to-one meetings as well, and just that really clear evidence. Yeah, I mean, it's really fantastic to have that sort of project that's also funded. We got about £40,000, I think, to do that. So that, benefited us financially, but also gave us that fantastic data. We then ran a small conference that we shared that information with. We had some of the people that were the peers that did that research sharing their experiences and sharing their findings through the research. We invited commissioners, senior managers, people from the NHS and local authorities along to that. And yeah, it's really stuck in their mind. And actually, they've come back to me since and said, no, at that conference, so-and-so said, this was an issue. And because it was so tangible and real and they heard it, it's much more powerful than, just reading a bit of data or just me saying we should be doing this. Because I would be saying that anyway, but if you hear that from the real people, then makes all the difference. Staff development, engagement, retention, particularly thinking about our individual that's on that research fellowship. It's just such a wonderful opportunity for her. She got her master's degree a while ago. She's looking at further development, but if she can do that from within our organisation rather than leaving it, obviously that's fantastic because it builds the skills across our services. And it kind of gives us another string to all of our bows, doesn't it? If we can think, oh, we could get our name on a research paper, or some people it's obviously not their thing, but some people can really get into it and really get a much deeper understanding of the work that we do. And then thinking about the wider policy agenda, both in terms of that listening and engagement piece that I was talking about, but also in terms of the evidence of the impact of our work. To have all of that data, all of that research backing up our work, and then be able to talk to the likes of our local MPs, senior leaders, that sort of thing, and contributing to that wider national policy agenda around mental health, well-being, the environment. It's just, if you have that evidence, you have that research, you have that underpinning, particularly where there's that partnership with the universities as well, it really validates the work that we do. And it's not just me saying it, it's, somebody externally has validated it and said that this is an important point, and then we can use that to further our arguments and further our cause. And then finally, empowering the beneficiaries and the wider community to engage. I think, were we not doing this, we could carry on delivering our services, but actually our work is much more about transformational change, isn't it? And if we can empower our beneficiaries and empower our communities to get involved in that transformational change, it's going to be much more meaningful and impactful and sustainable than if we just keep delivering services to and at people, because that's not going to achieve the change. That's just going to stick a plaster on it. It's not going to actually address the root cause. So that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was wonderful. And I really take away the point you've made about transformational change and research being an avenue for, you know, making it more concrete in the ways that you can show what you do and why it's beneficial for people. I'm so pleased to now introduce Linus Lewis, who will talk to us about developing research culture in organizations and enabling others to get involved. Linus is a highly experienced researcher and has served as the service director of NOCLAW for nearly 2 decades, leading its growth into the largest non-acute research office in the country and forging partnerships with mental health trusts, primary care, and non-NHS organizations across North London. She is a steadfast champion of research in these settings, and she challenges the traditional views of research capabilities of these organizations. Linus was appointed as the first Director of Research for the North London NHS Foundation Trust, and she has co-led the development of an ambitious mental health strategy with the UCL Institute of Mental Health. In 2024, Linus received the Lifetime Achievement Award at the NIHR North Thames CRN Research Awards for her outstanding contribution to advancing research and fostering cross-sector collaboration. As part of the UKRD leadership team, she plays a pivotal role in influencing national policy in mental health and wider care research. Thank you so much for joining us, Linus, and over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. I was listening to that. I was quite embarrassed because actually the Lifetime Achievement Award, I think it just tells you all that I'm old. Actually, I'm kind of, they're pushing me out, but anyway, I'm here to stay. So, and thank you anyway for that introduction. And thank you for asking me to talk actually about research culture and embedding the research culture in organizations. As Sylvie said, we're an R&D office for mental health, primary care, and what is now known as wider care settings. And when we talk about wider care settings, we just mean anything really that's non-NHS in that sense. So hospices, schools, and those sorts of things. So areas. And there's a real push now from the NIHR and DH to extend research into those areas. And when I thought about it, and I thought about what am I going to talk about, it made me think about NOCLAW and why, not necessarily about the work we do, because the work we do is all about getting research done in those areas. But it made me think about why do we do it the way that we do, and how has NOCLAW kind of made this journey into this big R&D office in a sense that serves um, what I would call peripheral, marginalized areas in that sense. So, you know, primary care, mental health, those wider care settings, they've kind of been neglected for many, many years in terms of research. And I think it's no coincidence that it's an area that I've always been interested in and always been passionate about. And I think it's because of my own personal experience and so it made me think about what part of my personal experience has driven and shaped Knocklaw. Why is it the way that it is? And I do think that perspective that I bring as a Black woman, where I myself have navigated systems that are not, where voices like mine aren't heard, where I am marginalized, where I am peripheral, where I'm not heard, really resonates with the experiences that mental health trusts have, with primary care have, and those wider care settings. So I think there's no coincidence about the way that we've shaped Knocklaw and the values that we have, because it's driven very much, and it can't be divorced from that. I think it's just driven very much by personal experience. And so that is really what I'm going to talk about, that journey and our values and kind of why we're there, why we are where, why we do what we do and the way that we do it. So if we, next slide, please. So anybody that has been to any of my presentations, I love a quote. So I always start with a quote and I always end with a quote, and it's kind of become my thing. And this quote I felt really speaks to what we do and why we do it. And it's about the coming together. So this is a Henry Ford quote: coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. And I use this quote because I think it really embodies what we're trying to do. It really is important because I think, as we say, the coming together is what's important and where it all starts. But what is difficult for many is that keeping together to make progress. Sometimes it gets quite, you're facing all sorts of challenges and all sorts of difficulties, and you kind of can give up sometimes. But it's that keeping together where the progress is made, that resilience to keep going, know that you're doing the right thing, and knowing that working together is what brings about success. Because people say it, and it's a nice thing to say, and we all talk about collaboration. Do you know what I mean? People will talk, the powers that be talk about collaboration and partnership and all of those wonderful things, and it's like a given. But what does that really mean? And what amount of work do you have to put in to sustain that and to think that that amount of work is really, really important? And so for us, the philosophy is, for us, it is really important. And I talk about that because, and I talk about it, and it is important because it's important to me, it's important to my life. And I use those personal experiences to keep going and to shape the things that we do. So for me, it's important. And I would say I picked Henry Ford, and Henry Ford is all about standardization, actually. And what we're not about is standardization. What Knocklaw isn't about is that bit of Henry Ford, but we are a bit about the journey and coming together. So we recognize that standardization isn't what brings out the best, actually isn't, and doesn't bring the best outcomes. So we're not about standardization for Henry, but we are about that journey and coming together and working together and staying together. So next slide. So we are an R&D office. We're made up of a number of mental health trusts. So we have East London, Tavistock and Portman, North London, CNWL, Central and North West London, and West London. And we also do primary care. And we are really a federated model. So for those of you that are kind of voted Brexit, this bit of the talk isn't for you, because what it's saying is this federated model, it really reflects my deepest beliefs, and I would say now I think the team's deepest beliefs about power and leadership, and that this approach, what it doesn't demand is uniformity. So we're saying we can come together, celebrate our differences. There's some commonalities that we work to, some rules that we all have to abide by, but actually we're not about uniformity. It is really about the power that emerges from those different perspectives that we bring. So we've got a shared purpose, and I would say I'd say like the EU, Knocklaw's federated model thrives on unity and diversity, but I'm not sure the EU quite does it that well. But we probably do it better than the EU. They might want to look at our model and see how we do it. But that's the philosophy of the EU, and that's what they're striving for. And there's all sorts of challenges, just like we face, but it is about coming together in diversity, coming together with that difference and using that to something that's absolutely more powerful. The unity is what brings something more powerful and more transformational. So next slide. So the Knocklaw way in action, and what we did, we kind of could, as a team, we came together to think about what is it, what are those principles that we work to, because sometimes you lose sight of what you're doing and so we thought we needed to come together to kind of reaffirm what it is that we're doing and think strategically about how we're going to go forward. And in coming together, it was thinking, what are those values? What are those principles that we work to? And what we identified 8 of them. There's a bit about shared leadership, and that is saying that we don't lead from above. Do you know what I mean? It is this shared leadership. We lead with and alongside each other. All the trusts come in, they bring different perspectives, they bring different needs, but actually it is about this shared leadership and this learning together that we have. And I think we know that leadership that's rooted in community and trust and equity ensures that the decisions that we make are for everybody. Then, you know, the decisions that we make are, we're not in it alone. So we are in it together, and those voices we're stronger together. So that's the thing about the shared leadership, we're stronger together. Then we've got the cross-organisation integration, and that's, I think, the beauty of having a number of organisations working together. We're forced to work together. We're one R&D office, and we work together, and we have that shared learning. What one trust might do, that we take the good stuff from them and then use it, or, you know, vice versa. So there is something about taking the competition out, because trusts can get very competitive, and actually sometimes they're forced to be competitive, the way that the powers that be, the way that politics drives the NHS, and there's this competition that's forced upon us sometimes. But actually what we're saying is, let's take the competition out, because that's not what serves research best. Competition does, we are in it, we all want to benefit from it. And so we kind of have to let go of that competition and encourage people to let go of that competition. And that's been sometimes a struggle over the years, but that's where we've worked to. And how you do that is through trust as well. You build up that trust over the years. And so you work to bit where we're together. We're connecting systems, we're connecting people and resources that I would say removes barriers. But I think you have to get beyond the competition and know that this coming together, this integration, gives something that's much more powerful and something stronger. And actually, when we're separate, our voices are much weaker, especially in the areas that we're speaking of, especially in mental health, especially in primary care. Our strength comes in being together. Then we've got about diverse patient engagement. Now, we talk about diverse patient engagement, and we know that we're not great at it in research, to be honest, but it has been something that has always been a priority for us. And I go back to the personal journey and say it is a priority, because I take my experiences once again as a Black woman. And actually, we have a very diverse team. So our team reflects London in all of its kind of multicultural glory. Do you know what I mean? Glory in that sense. And so we take from all of our experiences, and no one experience is the same as another, but there is the real strength in that. So even we know, we have family ourselves, we have been we're underrepresented in research, and that's something that we know is important and that we work towards. So people use their own experiences for that. And we really try to think about how we engage with patients, how we get out to those underrepresented, underserved communities that are us. They are me, so there's no point sitting there and not bringing what I know and what I've lived and what I feel, or any, that we bring that to the table and try to use that to help with patient engagement. We're engaging with communities. We've done studies. We did a Chaga study, which was with Brazilian community, and luckily we've got somebody from Brazil in our team, and that made it a lot easier to think about, how do we get into these communities? How do we engage? And what are the good links? And those links we want to keep and maintain. So relationship building, we all know that relationships fundamentally are what drive things. You have good relationships with people, you have trusting relationships with people, and that comes from time and working alongside. So when you have that, when you have those relationships, and they're relationships of equality, They're not relationships of power and we own and we tell, but they're relationships of equity and listening and knowing that we each bring something special to the table. So that's what we do. And I'm not saying that we get this absolutely right. We keep striving to do better, but that's one of our fundamental principles. The cross-pollination, it's once again, I mean, all of these things, the fundamental things to any of these principles are about the sharing of ideas, the coming together, the being in a partnership, in a collaboration, in a strong relationship. And what we want to do is make sure that those collaborations are sustainable, because there's nothing worse. And what we've heard, we've spoken to patients. When I was a researcher, you speak to patients, and what they feel sometimes is we come and we take, and we want them to give, and then we leave, and we've left. And do you know what I mean? What is it that we're giving back? And so for us, it's really, really important that we have those sustainable collaborations, that they are not a one-off. They are something that we work at and to keep and maintain. And we've had relationships for years, many, many years, and people know they can come and talk to us and get advice and get support and all of those things. But those are relationships that are not transitory. They cannot be that we come in, we ask, and this kind of transactional thing, and then we leave because we've got what we want. And so we know the sustainable collaborations are really important. There's things about accessibility and trying to make things as accessible as possible. That's not a luxury, that's a must and a given. And then we've got about coordinated project management and how we try to coordinate across the things that we do. And there is something about we do have to be efficient. This is the world we work in. We work in a world where we have limited funds. We're always looking to see how we can keep those funds. Do you know what I mean? We have to be efficient. It's public money. We have to be efficient. But the thing is about we have to do things right, but we have to do them right together. So yes, of course, we have to get things right and we have to try and be efficient, but we have to do that together, and they have to be those kind of shared decisions. Next slide. So, I mean, I talk about these things and it all sounds wonderful, all cross collaboration and all the rest of it, and it sounds great. And I may have made it sound easy, but it's not. These are things that you have to work at. So we've had real challenges across the time, but you've got to expect those challenges and you've got to be committed to dealing with them openly and honestly and thinking how about what you have to do and sustaining that. Because what happens a lot of the time is that people it's challenging and you give up and we don't sustain. So with those challenges, we have to think of solutions. So next slide. So these are just some of the challenges that we've had. Organizational diversity. So it's wonderful, it's great, we celebrate it, but it's really hard to work with because everybody's different and wants something that's different sometimes. So it's great, but it does require work to work with that diversity. And if you recognize that and you're committed to it, then it's fine. Do you know what I mean? But I think when we talk about our organisational diversity, we've also thought about how people can hold us to account. And so we've got these governance structures that mean that they know that they have a voice and that we are accountable. The system level bureaucratic barriers, I don't think there's anybody that works in public sector that would say that doesn't exist. Everybody has to deal with it and you just have to find a way. Do you know what I mean? Because it is what it is. We're bureaucratic monsters. We create all sorts of things that just get in the way of doing the right thing sometimes. And so you just have to think, we are that, but there are ways around it. There are ways to tackle that. And that's about being, and so you have to be a bit creative, but you have to be also be open and honest, and be open and honest with people about the bureaucracy that you have to work with, help them understand it, and then we can tackle it much better. We talked about sustaining collaboration over time, and that's, I think, it goes to building relationships and those honest relationships where people trust you, and then that collaboration over time is much easier. The adapting to policy and system changes. Once again, we work in public sector, we work in the NHS, I work in the NHS. It's all about that. It is ever thus, it feels like it's constant change. So those are things that are never, that's not going to change. Do you know what I mean? So you have to find ways to work with it, and you have to be agile. And once again, you have to be creative. We talk about ensuring equitable access to research. We've spoken about that quite a bit, and that is a fundamental, and you just have to work hard at it and include people, because when you include people, you hear different voices and it gives you different ways of working and different ideas. And then the last challenge is when we get it wrong, actually. And I talked to my team about this because I said it was a challenge, because actually it's really difficult to admit when you get it wrong. And I don't know if you, I mean, anybody that works with R&D offices, people always moan about R&D offices and think that we're not, that think that we get things wrong, which we do, but we don't admit it. And it is quite hard because sometimes it feels quite personal. Today we had an email complaint. We didn't have an email complaint. We suggested something to a researcher from some patient feedback, and she sent a really rude email back. And that's the thing, when you take things so personally, what it means is that you can't learn from it and you can't then do something that's better and right. And so you have to take the personal, it feels really personal sometimes. Sometimes it is personal, actually, but you just have to kind of rise above it. But you have to think, if we're going to do better, I have to kind of put my ego and my feelings somewhere else and look at it and be really open and honest and think, actually, what can we learn from this? So that's a really difficult one. And the team find it difficult. And sometimes I find it difficult. But you have to just take a deep breath and get in there and be open and honest and look at it and take the personal out. And then when you do, that's when you can kind of bring around some transformation, because you're really learning. So the next slide. I said I start on a quote and I end on a quote. So Zora Neale Hurston is an anthropologist. I mean, she died many years ago. She's from America. And oops, there you go. I've lost my, thank you. So she talks about, and this is what it's all about. This is what it's all about and why we do what we do. It's all, research is, it's not complicated. It's not something that is other. It is something for everybody, because all it is formalized curiosity. So what she says really resonates, I think, with what we want to do. And she talks about this poke, and I put it here because I love this quote, because I think it really speaks to everything that we do. And it is, you've got permission to be nosy, poke and pry, but you do it with purpose. And it's a seeking that he who wishes may know the cosmic secrets of the world, and they that dwell therein. And there's something about her quote that democratizes knowledge, that says it's for us all. And our job, and so the job of NOCLAW, is to make sure that research is for all. And I think what we're trying to do in terms of our culture, our values, our principles, and the way that we work is to make it as accessible, so accessible for those services that are marginalized, and accessible and peripheral, and accessible for those people that are marginalized and peripheral. And we love working with people. We want people to hold us to account, and we want people to come with ideas. And I think if we take, if you take anything away, that's the principles of NOCLAW. That's how we've got. And it is a personal journey. I make no excuse for that. It is driven by me. It was driven by me personally. But along the way, we've got many converts. I feel like it's a cult now, the cult of NOCLAW. But we've got many converts because it's really, really important. And it works. And it brings good outcomes. So I think that's where I'm going to end.
Thank you so much, Linus and Matt. That was absolutely wonderful. And I was sat here kind of completely rapt and nodding along enthusiastically to everything you were saying. I have my own reflections, but both in the interests of time and because we have been so privileged to have Selina and Sandev join us for the reflection part, I will hand over to them with a brief introduction of Sedina, who is a public health principal at the London Borough of Havering and one of the NIHR ARC North Thames Mental Health Research for All MHL alumni, as well as Sandev, who is a peer support program and mental health lead for universities at Forward Thinking Birmingham and a current MHL fellow. So over to you two. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sylvie. Should I kick us off then? So thank you so much, Matt and Dennis, for your presentations. I too was also kind of nodding and can resonate with most of what you were saying. So I've been tasked with giving my bit of information about my experience and reflections, providing that local authority perspective on developing a research culture. So prior to working at Havering Council, I worked as a senior systematic reviewer in a very research active environment at the National Guidelines Centre for developing NICE guidelines. And before moving to local government, I assumed that most council services will be proactively engaging with research evidence, kind of constantly doing evaluation to inform decision making. And then I quickly realised that this isn't always the case. Engaging with research can be really challenging for local authorities where there are significant funding pressures and the various statutory duties that we've got to perform. And research is often seen as a kind of nice to do thing that's kind of pushed down the list of priorities. But developing a research culture will really will require a deliberate shift in how a local authority thinks and operates. As the speakers shared, research can be really valuable for shaping policy, how we engage with our residents and deliver our services, ensuring that we are involving our residents in that process and being able to make sure that we are using our limited resources in the best way. And this should be a priority for us. So when we're reflecting on the barriers and facilitators for local authorities developing a research culture, some thoughts come to mind. And they're framed more around three themes, which I think Matt and Linus from their presentations kind of echo and share. And those three themes for me are capacity, connection, and vision. So around capacity, considering the high pressures within local government, it can be difficult to free up staff time. However, it is actually really important that staff have time to engage with research in a meaningful way. So we mentioned that I did a research internship as part of the kind of MHL program. And for that, I had up to 2 days a week of protected time, which was really great because I was able to focus, work with the research team at UCL Partners, and really just re-engage my mind around research and evaluation. And that was a couple of years ago. And actually, as part of that, my director recognised the impact and value of actually having that protected and dedicated time. And since then, I've had 1 day a week of protected time, focusing on how we can build our research culture within Havering Council. And now as part of that protected time, I work with other local authorities in North East London as part of my public health engagement lead role. So the public health engagement lead role is a funded role through the NIHR Specialist Centre for Public Health. And in that role, I connect with local authorities across North East London and support them, providing that leadership and building those connections so that we can kind of work together and really just showcase the value of local authorities being a research active organisation. So the Specialist Centre for Public Health, and I believe there are some colleagues on the call here from the Specialist Centre, recognises the benefits of capacity building within local authorities and has a number of funding opportunities to support with that. So There is the public health engagement leads, or FEL for short, where I'm one of those. And there's also the local authority research practitioner as well. And I think, again, when I was reviewing the chat, it seems like there are some LARPs on the call as well. And again, that's a really good opportunity for local authorities to tap into some external funding to have that dedicated time, so that research can be championed. So the LARPs really contribute to increasing that research capacity and capability within local authorities. And I believe the special centre has actually funded 76 local authorities across the country as well. So there is that growing kind of recognition of the need for that dedicated capacity within local authorities to really move that ambition forward of building the kind of research culture. In addition, actually, the Special Centre has the Public Health Grassroots Awards as well, which are for personal short-term awards for colleagues in local authority, non-NHS providers and voluntary sector as well, to access some funding to support them with engaging with research. So as part of my protected time, I've actually been able to secure funding for our LARP within Havering Council as well, and support other local authorities and now. So again, that just provides a bit of a taste as to the importance of that capacity and the impact that having dedicated capacity can have. And I'm sure, again, like I said, there's LARPs on the call and others in local authorities as well who may want to kind of share their experience in the chat. So the second theme I wanted to kind of touch on was connection as well. Local authorities, we are still very much learning how to utilise and engage with research in the best way, and who we need to engage with in order to do that as well. Some local authorities are further along in that journey. For example, there are the Health Determinants Research Collaborations, or HDRCs for short, and kind of HDRC-like local authorities as well. So we don't have the significant investment that HDRCs have, but really do have made that commitment to engage with research more. The London and Essex Local Authority Public Health Research Network, hosted by the ARC North Thames, provides a space for connection as well. So local authorities that are HDRCs, or colleagues in local authorities and HDRCs, HDRC-like local authorities that are just kind of dipping their toes into the world of research, can connect, and we can share learning, find out about research opportunities, be able to have conversations and discussions about how we can navigate research within local authority settings as well. So that connection can be really valuable. And as one of the operational leads for the network, I've been able to see that firsthand as well. And I think it really does build on the points that Linus and Matt mentioned about that connection, and not, sometimes we just look at our organisation and looking at how we can benefit our organisation. But I think it is really important to look outwards and to connect with others who are at similar stages, further ahead, or even who are kind of maybe a bit behind in terms of that as well. And then finally, and I think maybe most importantly, is vision. For this to be an embedded culture shift towards being more research active, it needs to be championed throughout the whole organisation, including senior and political leaders as well. So within Havering, we're actually going to be developing a research strategy to outline this commitment, to provide a bit of a roadmap as to how we're going to move ourselves from being kind of a research active-ish to more engaged, actively seeking opportunities, upskilling staff as well, and connecting also with our communities. I think that work around engaging with the communities and that their role in research is really interesting, and it's something that's developing as well. So that's kind of what our ambitions are within Havering, where we're hoping that this strategy will really identify what resource and infrastructure is needed to support the organisation, and be able to so that we can demonstrate our shared commitment to embedding research within our core practices. Thank you.
Thanks, Adina. Over to you, Sendev.
Great, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Sandev. So Sylvie gave a really nice introduction. So my job has changed ever so slightly. So I'm peer support hub lead for Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Foundation Trust, and also university peer support lead. So both of those involve kind of setting up lived experience rooted services across clinical and non-clinical teams across both universities and within the trust. And it's really, interesting that both your presentations, Matt and Linus, both kind of touched on lived experience. And I think when we talk about research in the context of lived experience, actually, if we talk about lived experience, research in the context of kind of any of our day-to-day jobs, it's quite a scary term. And when kind of like introducing the term of research to people in the trust and people who kind of work on more of an operational basis, it's quite hard to kind of help them to understand that research in itself is, and I really love that quote, Linus, is kind of formalized curiosity. I think I'll be kind of sharing that with the team. So as I said, really enjoyed the presentations, and you kind of capture those really real challenges and I guess building that research positive culture. And I guess through my MHR fellowship, I've been looking at how lived experience, peer support, and kind of universities can kind of all intertwine in a way we can use lived experience to support student mental health. And a lot of my work has been connecting NHS, universities, voluntary sector partners in building those bridges where we are kind of working alongside people who have lived experience as not just participants, but collaborators. And I think it's really fantastic to see that both your focuses also involving people, I guess, with lived experience and research, which is, I guess, a really important shift in kind of that culture change. And I think what stood out to me was how much of that work still relies on quantitative measures. So, a lot of the work that we do relies on, like Warwick Edinburgh scale, as you mentioned, Matt, because a lot of those line with a lot of clinical work that happens, and a lot of evaluation outcomes rely on that quantitative measure. And I think what we need to make that shift towards, especially when looking at research culture change, is how do we incorporate that qualitative data, that storytelling, that creativity, because all of that is such rich and valuable data, and how do we make it safe for people to bring those qualitative approaches and promote them as real research, and especially when we talk about that developing of that culture. And I think those challenges that both of you mentioned around kind of navigating organizational diversity and kind of that sustained collaboration and absolutely, like, I mean, dealing with the bureaucracy, which I come across quite a bit. But it's how we build those relationships and rooted in the trust and that shared purpose. And I think, you touched really nicely on that, Linus, around how we can go beyond, I guess, like traditional funding cycles that come around, but actually how do we embed it? And equitable, as kind of you mentioned, Matt, is another big one that I popped down in my notes. Is that too often that we, get the same people getting the opportunity? So those who feel like ready or confident or connected. And I think part of my MHR fellowship program has been looking at how to make more inclusive entry points, so that peer support workers, for example, who have lived experience, students, kind of like frontline practitioners, can see themselves as researchers and not just contributors. And actually, as we work alongside people, what do they get out of it? As you mentioned, Linus, but how do we give back, and how do we say, all right, you've been involved in the research here, what is it that we can do together to make quick wins, policy changes over the longer term, kind of smaller cultural shifts within teams, and that kind of get that to grow. And when we get it wrong, which we all do, that's where the learning happens. And I think where research hasn't often been the core of a lot of organizational cultures, we are going to get things wrong. So actually, don't be afraid of making those mistakes as we go along, because that's where the learning and the growth happens. And I think so kind of with that in mind, I think my reflection really is about how do we make research feel less like an add-on and more like a part of everyday culture, and that culture of care, and something that is, I guess, shared, offers meaning, and I guess we're able to use that sort of language as part of our kind of everyday working life and life outside of that, really. So I think my question, which might lead quite nicely into the Q&A. So how do we, in my mind, so how do we design systems and then that make collaboration, I guess, sustainable, inclusive, while still valuing the quantitative stuff? How do we then also value the lived experience and that qualitative stuff in kind of this new wave of building research culture?
Thank you so much, Sandeep and Sadina and Linus and Matt. I think it's been an incredibly productive set of insights that you've shared, wonderful reflections. And to your question of kind of what do we do now, I guess, is your question, Sandeep, of how do we bring different aspects of both impact measurement and lived experience in developing and growing research culture in new settings or in phases of services, communities, and research opportunities in ways that are inclusive, sustainable, and equitable. I think that's where your question. So, Matt and Linus, would you be happy to take that on as the first question for the Q&A portion? Happy if you would like to go first, Linus, and then Matt.
No, I'm just sorry. I feel terrible. Just repeat the question.
No, you're absolutely fine. Sandeep, you've got it written, I think, in your notes. So if you wanted to just repeat it, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I think from the question that I was kind of thinking around, based on what you both talked about, is how do we design, I guess, systems that make collaborations, I guess, conclusive and sustainable, whilst valuing that qualitative aspect of that lived experience, that creativity, as opposed to kind of relying quite a lot on quantitative approaches, which are valued quite heavily by clinical teams?
Who's going first? Is it me or you, Matt?
I'm happy to speak to the qualitative thing. I think, as I was saying in my earlier presentation, people telling their real stories is just so powerful, isn't it? And I think where you can have, highlight and amplify the voices of people with lived experience, empowering them to get involved in the research and the evaluation and capturing the data, and then presenting it back or presenting back their own stories and the stories of people that they've engaged with through research, through evaluation, like particularly where holding a conference or an event or a webinar or whatever, and then having that lived experience has just proved to me to be so powerful. I think we're going to have to start thinking much more systems thinking and as one system across voluntary sector, health, social care, academia, and communities more broadly. We all need to be working together for transformation. I think we've kind of divided the way we do our business into all of these different quite distinct sectors, and sometimes it just feels like Whitehall does that up there, and then we kind of have to do that on the ground. And I think we're going to have to start thinking much more systemically and person-centered and community-based rather than is it primary care, is it secondary care, is it acute, is it like that? Just doesn't work, does it? Because the money's flowing in the wrong directions, and a lot of it's being wasted. It needs to be built around the person. So I think and I think actually research and qualitative research can do that, because it can actually bring it back to the person and to the community, rather than it all being about, this is my clinical outcome and this is my set of procedures. And as Linus was talking about, the bureaucracy can get in the way, can't it? And how do we tear the bureaucracy out and make it about the person and the community?
Yeah, and I mean, I echo what Matt says, and I think there's something, and you're right, there's this, I think it's changing, but this kind of power dynamic between, do you know what I mean, quantitative and qualitative and all of those sorts of things. But I think there's something about visibility and how we make it visible and those stories that we share. So I think, if we're wanting to show the power of it, we need to show the power of it. really. And so I think when Matt was just saying about us coming together, there's all sorts, I mean, there's forums like this, but I think that there's something really important about seeing the examples, seeing what it does and hearing about it, to kind of get that, you know, for it to be taken seriously in that sense. So I would say there's something about visibility in organizations, and I think academia is, especially in mental health anyway. I can speak to mental health, and I think they embrace the whole qualitative bit, really. Do you know what I mean in that sense? But I think we have to show and teach people that it's really important and has power. Or if I answered your question, actually, but
I think you did. I think the point about visibility, representation, working systemically and also collaboratively, that I really take your point, Matt, about in all trying to develop a research culture. It's being done, if not individually, but within each organization and sector. And actually there's a lot of power in working across these organizational boundaries, both towards shared goals and objectives, but also in Linus's point about working together and having cross-function in the federation model, where we're greater than the sum of our parts when we work together. I think that speaks to your point, Sadina, about the pressures that local authorities in particular face in delivering statutory services, and where research develops or what role it has there, and how it evidences impact areas for improvement and innovation. And I always come back to the fact that when you are faced with a challenging environment, it is also an environment full of opportunity. It means that things can change, that there's a shift that can happen, and it requires people to reach across or look up from, you know, what they have in front of them and see where there are spaces to work together towards something that is better for everyone ultimately. So I think that your collective reflection has been so helpful as not just a forum discussion, but kind of in bringing together these different aspects of excellent work in developing research culture, but also for us to all learn together. So thank you so much for sharing so generously, speaking so frankly in some regards, and also just bringing authenticity to what we're talking about. I'm kind of really struck, Linus, in what you said about designing a research and development office or a program that is really reflective of what you would need from it and who you are as a person. It chimes with me in the way that I have approached research, that it's not separate from who I am. And it's not just my own ingrained interest or curiosity with the world, it's also how I see things changing in the world, and as a powerful tool to do that. So thank you all for all your reflections. We've got some really wonderful questions in the chat. I think I'll start with one that's specifically addressed to Linus, and then move to some of the more group ones. Sorry. But Andrea's asked, how do you introduce or change a research culture in a department that doesn't traditionally engage in research? And Sadina, maybe you can also reflect on this in what you found with working in building research engagement and culture in local authorities.
do you want me to
Yeah.
start? And
yeah.
I mean, this is a struggle actually, because I think there are, across organisations, across the NHS anyway, I can speak to, there are lots of places that don't engage in research and are not used to doing it. And I think there are certain things that you have to do, that you have to put in place. And I would say one of them is support from the top leadership, because if you get that, if you kind of can get leadership support, then it makes things much easier to do. If you've got somebody at the top championing you, somebody with authority, then it makes it, yeah, I think it helps with doing that. And I mean, I mentioned this thing about making it visible and accessible. And so you have to, they're not used to doing research, and you kind of have to think, how do I not spread the word, but how do I sell it in a way? How do I tell them how important it is? Do you know what I mean? And we all, I mean, we all use health and social care in some way. We all want good treatments for ourselves, for our families, whatever, whether it's in mental health, cancer, whatever. We all want good healthcare. And so if you speak to that and those people's personal experiences and explain that the way that we get that, and it's true, the way that we get that medical, treatments and all that, it's through research. Research is fundamental to how health services are delivered, how good health services are delivered, and you have to just, I think, you tell those stories. So I would say you need some high level support, because when you have that, it makes things so much easier. But I think you have to think how you engage with people to make it real and live.
Thank you. Sadina, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, one thing that's worked quite well for us, so my public health team. So, I mean, for public health research evidence, it's, is what we do. So there wasn't not too much convincing needed there. But I think even within that, we also have quite tight capacity as well. And it can be quite difficult finding the time to, review evidence and things. So something that I've started, I think it was last year, was a journal club. So I think it's every month or every 2 months now we meet. So we discuss a paper, obviously relevant to the work that we're doing as well. So depending on the department, it might be, where it's not a department that is familiar with, scientific papers or published research. It could even be looking at a news article that's been published and having a discussion about some of the evidence that's kind of underpinning that as well, just to spark that curiosity as well about what kind of evidence is saying, how you would kind of critically look at evidence as well, and thinking about that in terms of how that applies to day-to-day role as well.
Thank you. So that leads really nicely into the next question I'm going to pull from the chat. And Matt, it'd be great if you could take this one on first. So from the Caribbean and African Health Network, there's a question about the fact that lived experience is useful to research. However, representation is a big part of making the evidence of lived experience useful. How do you increase representation when there is mistrust or reluctance or non-engagement by people whose experience you want to capture and share? And I think the point for me there, and then how it links to what you were saying, Sadina, is that relevance and whose experience are we sharing? So Matt, are you happy to take that one, and would you like me to repeat the question?
I'm happy to have a go. I think the important thing here is to get alongside people. It's not about doing to or at people. As I said earlier, it's about empowering people and engaging them. And I mean, the best way to do that is to work with them through the groups that are already working with them, rather than to kind of set up new and extra and different things. I mean, that's where the role of the voluntary community sector is, can be really powerful and helpful. There are a lot of established groups out there, charities, organizations, peer groups, that sort of thing. I think with the right understanding of why they would be getting involved and what the benefits are and what the impact is, then they would be interested in getting involved. I think if you just say, oh, we need to do some research on your population or whatever, they may well be quite rightly suspicious. But if it was, we need to do this research, or we would like to do this research because it will benefit the health outcomes, it will benefit those people individually, because then they can grow and develop through this learning opportunity. We could turn it into I talked about research parties, or a mini festival, or an event where actually there's nice things to get involved with. People have to come together around food and music, and we're social animals, aren't we? We love that sort of side of it. And then if we can kind of have the research alongside it, there's different ways to do it. When we did our suicide engagement work, it's quite a tough thing to talk through with people with that lived experience, or people being affected by suicide. Partly it was about creating that safe environment, partly it was about creating a space where people knew they could get other support beyond it and outside of it, partly because we also knew the council wanted us to do this work so that we could feed into their strategies. We did also book pizza and say afterwards we're going to have pizza and that's going to be delivered, and a bit of a sort of free lunch alongside it, and a chance for social connection too. So yeah, they're my thoughts on that.
Thank you. I'm just checking with Kirtana if there are any other questions that I have missed in the chat or to highlight. Let me just have a look.
Yeah, just having a look.
Sorry,
one moment.
Sylvie, sorry, whilst you're looking, I
Yes,
just
of course,
wanted, can I
Linus.
just jump in about
Of
the question
course.
about lived experience?
Yeah.
Because I think it is a really, I think it's a really important question, and it's something that we recognise a lot, that we have, in the end, a lot of, you want to have, and it's absolutely important that you have the lived experience voice. But what happens is that sometimes, we kind of go to the usual suspects because they're there and it's just easy. But it is much more difficult to go to, and I would say this, much more easy to go to those kind of those people that are not generally involved, and those people that have lots of, so Black people, so people from marginalised groups. I do think it is really important that we approach it in a way that is alongside, because we have to acknowledge the mistrust. I kind of sometimes, and I'm in research, do you know what I mean? I absolutely believe in it and committed to it. And sometimes I can feel slightly mistrustful, really, on certain things. And so I think there's this honest acknowledgement about why people mistrust and where that's come from, and this commitment, absolute commitment to working through it and doing things differently, with taking what they say on board. So I just think there has to be that commitment, and not the tokenistic stuff that sometimes happens, and really listening to sometimes what are quite painful things. So I just think that there's something in that we need to do differently.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's about working alongside and in a dedicated way towards that. I wanted to just highlight that Fran has helpfully included links to 2 papers. As a researcher, it's our nature to want to refer back to the research to look at and answer these questions, but to just say that there are some very helpful links and resources that have been included in the chat, which we will pull out and share with you all after the event as well, not just related to this question of representation and who is included, but also about different resources from the NIHR, the Research Support Service, local authority support and resources. And it's just a really positive thing in my view to have that crowdsourcing of what is out there and how we can find it, because navigating through to the right answers or the right resources is sometimes really challenging. I'm going to put this question to you all with the caveat that there may be others that come up. So the Caribbean and African Health Network person has also asked about whether there are aspects of the research process that are inherently not inclusive. And I mean, I could say that research is an exclusive domain. It's a very specific and often resource intensive aspect of looking at questions and answering or coming up with solutions and problems. So there are definitely, as I know it, established research processes that are exclusive or inherently not inclusive. But maybe I can respond to this in this question, that the purpose of trying to develop research culture is to make research more accessible, more inclusive, and something that works for everybody and part of our everyday working. And to work actively, I think, with what Linus was saying, against and around the power dynamics and the ways of making sure that the people are included genuinely and in a sustained way. So I wanted to, just as the final opportunity, ask if there are any other questions from the group, and or are there any reflections from our wonderful group of speakers that they'd like to share at this point. No?
I'm just going to
Yeah.
add on to that question about research not being inclusive. I think it's thinking about the barriers, isn't it? So things like language barriers are crucial, and technology, we often try to put stuff in things that are easy for us as a researcher to capture the data, but actually is that easy for the user?
Yeah.
So often it is about that human relationship, isn't it? And actually getting alongside people and having that discussion, and trying to do sort of open questions and things, but actually understanding people's stories, because people don't all fit neatly into little boxes, do they? But obviously that is, as you said, Sylvie, much more labour intensive and cost intensive, and we don't all have those resources. But the more we can do that, as Sandeep was talking about, that qualitative like research and getting people's real life stories, the much richer understanding of that. I mean, that huge diversity, the wonderful diversity of our population. Yeah, surely that's going to create better health, social care outcomes and policy.
Thanks, Matt. Sandeep?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Matt. And I think other kind of aspects around language are things to do with how we look at what outcome measures, if we are using those as part of research, work for some communities and not others. So we're doing a bit of work at the moment with the Chinese Community Centre in Birmingham, and we've looked at kind of implementing goals-based outcomes measures to look at kind of where someone is at the beginning of their journey, where someone is a bit further down the journey, which might be the end of the kind of the intervention at that point, but obviously not the end of their particular journey. And I think what we found is that using things like goals-based outcome measures, and the feedback we've had from people from the Chinese communities, is that when we talk about a goal, kind of from a kind of a Western point of view, we're talking more around kind of that short-term goal of, did you manage to get dressed today? Did you manage to kind of pop to the shop or go for a walk in the park, for example? Whereas we've had feedback from people in the Chinese community who have said that's not really how we see a goal. We see a goal as being something as much longer term, 10, 15, 20 years. So when you tell us to talk about a goal in our kind of that data collection method and that kind of research, that way of doing research, it doesn't truly capture what we want or what we particularly focus on, because our definition of what you talk about into a goal is very different to what we talk about.
Thank you. Such an important reflection. I'm going to quickly share my screen to share the feedback link. There's a QR code. Where are you? There you are. Thank you so much. While I also wrap up this webinar, I am so grateful to Linus, Matt, Sadina, and Sandev for both your time and your generosity in sharing your perspectives and your experiences. I think we had a range of views that all spoke to the same theme around the power of research and research culture in improving and making change that can be transformational for people both in their work, but for communities that you all serve as well. And it was just an important reminder to me of why we do the work we do and why we come together in a learning space together to share both our experiences and our expertise, but also make connections across the groups. So thank you all so much for contributing to this webinar, and thank you to all of you who have attended and asked questions and hopefully made some connections. We do act on the feedback that you share with us. It's really important to us to know that we are providing events that work for you. If you'd like to join our mailing lists, here are the 2 QR codes, but we can also share these with you in the follow-up. And so, yeah, just to close today, thank you all so much for attending. Thank you for all your contributions, and I hope you have a lovely afternoon.